Well, thank you all very much, and appreciate you coming out on a snowy day. I just wish it was like this in California. We can use the snow. My talk this morning, I want to talk a little briefly about the country going and what I see. America has a history of building things. We built a democracy, one of the greatest republics ever. Ukraine would not have the weekend they had this last weekend if it wasn't for America. The desire, the creation, the idea of freedom. We built the greatest military. We built incredible infrastructures. We built the Golden Gate Bridge. We built families, communities, and we built dreams. We could build the Golden Gate Bridge in 3 years, but we've taken more than a decade to try to just add an on-ramp today. That's the difference of the America we know and the setbacks that regulations bring forth. Thomas Jefferson envisioned his government which thought to restrain men from injuring one another, but which would otherwise left them free to regulate their own affairs. The question we have before Washington today is, where is that measurement? Where is that middle? Where is that bind? Well, if you look at the current statistics, GAO federal regulations, there were issued 2,605 new rules during Obama. Impact of at least 100 million per year. Based on the agency's own analysis, more than 69.8 billion in new annual costs were added during Obama's first term. That's in addition to these regulations imposed 12 billion in one-time costs. Now I want you to think back. In 2010, there were more major rules promulgated than in any other year dating back to 1997. I give you these dates, but put in your own history. We're going through a 4-year recovery, and we're adding on the most regulation that we've had. What does that do? Of course, each year increment new regulations comes on top of other rules that are already in effect. Using the 2010 Small Business Administration study as its basis, the Competitive Enterprise Institute calculated that the total regulatory burden exceeded $1.8 trillion in 2012. $1.8 trillion. That's greater than all the annual economic activity in Canada, Mexico, or India. So you question, will we come out of this recovery? Now, being from California, I think I feel it more than anybody else, because I have a state that compounds it on the other. The restraints that we see hold back the ability for growth, and the goal here is to unshackle. So what is the Congress doing about it? Well, this week, the House has a package of regulatory reform bills that represent the most ambitious attempt to fix our regulatory process in over 60 years. The values represented in these bills are timeless and widely spread. Transparency, accountability, and rationality. In my home state, infrastructure and energy projects are continually held up or shut down because of sue and settle. We have a package of bills. One happens to be dealing with sue and settle. And next week, we'll tackle the most onerous regulation ever proposed by the EPA, the new Source Performance Standard Rule for future power plants. If you look at America and you look at the map, where has growth been? From North Dakota on down to Texas. And what has that been? That's been on private land. That's been on energy. And what does it mean with energy itself? Well, it means manufacturing jobs can come back because of the cost of where it's going. And when you think of America and you want to build jobs, if you took that energy, you took the lower cost, you made value added where you created a product, and then you sold it overseas, that's a fundamental shift and a fundamental change of growth. I live in a place in California of Kern County. We have 3 billion barrel fields. We are an oil community, an agriculture community, and an aerospace. Richard Branson wants to take you to space. They build it in my community of Mojave. Agriculture is very big. I have 2 families that grow 80% of all the carrots in the country. You ever eat a baby carrot? Yeah, there's no such thing. They're big carrots. We chop them, and we charge you more. Energy, been around for 100 years, the fields. But every week that I get on the plane to fly back to D.C., I go through Denver. There's 20 people on my plane going to North Dakota to work. You been to North Dakota? Don't go during winter, but if you go to North Dakota, you get a $1,000 signing bonus to work at fast food. There's not one foreclosed home. Unemployment's low. But we've got a government now that wants to regulate greater and stop the growth. That's the challenge what we have during a time of where we move. The question is, where will we be 30 to 40, 50 years from now? Now look, I did not support the president. He wasn't my choice. But I support the concept of our country. I celebrate the idea of inaugural. And when I sat there and I listened to the president use the words of Lincoln, that he was a Democrat, but he believed in Lincoln's words that government should not do more than what the person can do for themselves, I sat and I pondered for a moment. If Abraham Lincoln was alive today, what would be the advice that he'd give this president? What would he look to at a time that he built during the Civil War? The first advice I thought that Abraham Lincoln would give to this president was, believe in the exceptionalism of America. That America is exceptional and should lead the way. And there's no better way to show that is when in the Gettysburg Address. Remember what Lincoln wrote? Our four founders brought forth a new nation, dedicated to the prosperity that all men are created equal. And if we fail, the government for the people, by the people, of the people, shall perish from the face of the earth. He didn't say if we failed, Europe will do it, Mexico would do it, or somebody else. He said if we failed. When I watched this weekend, and I watched Ukraine, and I watched the individuals rise up, would they have done that if America hadn't shown the way? The idea of the Berlin Wall coming down. I want moving moments in my life. Tiananmen Square, an individual standing up before a tank. It's the idea of freedom and liberty. The second advice I think Lincoln would tell him is don't look back. Think about it. When Lincoln was inaugurated, it was March 1861. 7 states have already left the Union. I've read a lot about Lincoln. I've asked a lot of people about him. I never once heard him say it was James Buchanan's fault. Never once. The next advice I think he would give him is don't govern for the next election. By this I mean you watch Lincoln going into the next election. You had McClellan, you had the Democrats, all wanting to negotiate peace on a civil war. He didn't. He charged ahead. The nation was tired of war. And what happened? He didn't do it for the sake, he thought, I might lose the election. So what? I want the nation to grow. I want the nation to be together. He didn't say, I got to deal with the Keystone Pipeline after the election. It's a tough election vote. The next advice I think he would give, don't put off for the next generation. Nothing more telling, unbelievable of our forefathers, creation of this country. They put off the question of slavery. And no one understood it more than Lincoln. That if you've put off for the next generation what you should do today, what does that do for your children and your grandchildren? No more than the hundreds of thousands of grandchildren of the forefathers had to die to answer the question of slavery. So the question today is, what will America look like 30 to 50 years from now? Not based in a political nature, but based in an American nature. That you've had 100 years, a century of American growth. So I simply say this is what we should focus on. Today, Camp will unveil tax reform. We want an America that has the ability to grow. Second thing I should do, we should have regulation reform, not more of it. Too much duplication. Government of agencies that have built the idea that want to eliminate from risk. When you eliminate risk, you eliminate growth. You want to measure how much risk, but with more risk, you get a little greater growth. For that same reason, at 19 years old, I took all the wealth I had, I invested in myself in a deli. I don't know if you've ever heard the story. I grew up in a family of all Democrats. My father worked in a bowling alley, got a job as a firefighter, and moved furniture on his day off, so we had enough. I got out of high school, and I didn't apply myself. I couldn't get an academic scholarship. I couldn't get an athletic scholarship, even though I thought I should have. I went to junior college. I worked at a summer job. I saved my money. I met a guy that owned a liquor store but had a car dealer's license. You figure out how I met him when I'm 18, okay? And I talked him into taking me to the LA car auction so I could buy and sell cars and put my way through college. I found out later that was illegal, but I was being an entrepreneur. I stopped off at a grocery store on a Friday night because I was going to visit some friends at San Diego State in California, just started the lottery, and I bought a ticket and I won the lottery. 1985, put yourself in my place. You're 19, it's a Friday night, you just won $5,000 and you're 10 minutes away from Tijuana. You know what I did with that money? I took my folks to the nicest restaurant in town. I still remember my brother ordered dessert just to make the bill higher on me. But I took the rest of that money, almost all of it, and I invested in one stock. Because I believed in myself, I believed in taking risk. And I literally measured a greater risk, because with a greater risk, I got a greater return. If I failed, I didn't expect government to bail me out, but if I succeeded, I didn't expect government to take it all. You know what? I did all right. At the end of that semester, I said, you know what? I'm not going to go back to school. I took the rest of my money. I wanted to go buy a franchise, but no one would give a franchise to a 19-year-old or sell one. So I created my own. It was like Subway before Subway, right? I've spent 2 years at it. I did pretty well. I now had enough money I could pay my whole way through college. So I sold my business. When I sold my business, I read the paper and it said, be a summer intern in Washington, D.C. with my local congressman. And I thought, what a lucky guy he would be to have me, right? So I applied and he turned me down. But today you come to breakfast to listen to a congressman for a seat that I couldn't get an internship for, that I continue to strive, only in America. The question is, what will the next 50 years be? Tax reform, government regulation reform, energy policy. We become energy independent, all from North America. You go from Canada all the way down to Mexico. And then education reform. I believe that is a formation that the next century is ours. My kids are not going to compete with your kids. Our kids are going to compete with India and China. The question will be, will we continue to build that Golden Gate Bridge in 3 years, or will we have an America where we wait decades just to add an on-ramp because we'll get passed by the other countries? Thank you.